he can't do that, but they can't even really beat up on the rest of the Big Ten. They can squeak by the rest of the Big Ten despite having superior talent. Hello, I'm Colin.
And I'm Charlie.
And welcome to the first in a long time episode of C&C Talks. It's season 3, episode 29.
Yeah, just a reminder, we release episodes every week, except when we don't. And we talk about politics, world events, and sports. It is currently Tuesday, November 26th, 2024 at about 9:20 p.m. Pacific time as of us recording this.
Yeah, I feel like the more accurate way of saying it is we release episodes in some weeks.
Every so often.
Yeah, if we so often. Hopefully, our goal is to get from here to the end of the year. We're coming up on episode 100 here, the 32nd episode of the season, which
Are we on track to hit that by the end of the year?
Yeah, that we originally planned for 40 episodes this year. It's looking right now that 32 for this year will be our season finale as we get closer to the end of the year. But we will be doing a few things for our 100th episode, so stay tuned for that. It's to be honest, we've taken the last few weeks. We've been busy. We've been somewhat processing the election results. We haven't done an episode since then, and we won't spend too much time on it today because it's somewhat
Yes,
somewhat outdated.
Yeah, and I'm sure at this point you know who won.
Well, sure, but more about like the fallout from it. But like in a way, like our way of processing it in a lot of ways has been not spending too much time looking at politics. We're kind of exhausted by it. We've spent the better part of 4 years talking about and following this election, and now it's over, and we can at least for a little while take a break before getting back into it. And our way of processing has kind of been two things: sports, lots of sports, and college apps, which are boring. So we're not going to talk about those on the podcast. We will talk about sports like we do every single week, and it'll be a long sports section specifically on college football. Stay tuned for the end of our show this week, Charlie. It's a very anticipated segment coming up. Because
you've been waiting for this one for a while.
Yeah, I am often accused of being too quick to call for coaches' jobs, and I am doubling down. I am going to call for the jobs of 10 college football power conference head coaches at the end of the show. And let me just tell you right off the bat, I chose violence. So get ready for it.
You so often do.
Yeah, get ready for it. That's all I'll say.
All right, so let's get to the politics news. And there were a couple of uncalled races last time we talked about the election. All of those, except are there any that have not been called yet?
Yeah, I think that there's still a couple of California House districts. I think most estimates say that California still has about 150,000 votes left to tabulate.
Wow, that's awful.
So, yeah, again, we're 3 weeks after the election, folks. Just
yes, according to
a couple things can be true. Number one, that just because it takes a really long time to tabulate votes does not mean that there's evidence of fraud. It does not mean that those votes aren't valid. What's also true is that it would really, really be nice if these states could get a lot quicker at tabulating their votes.
Yes. According to New York Times, there are only 3 uncalled districts as of right now: the 13th District of California, the 45th District of California, and the 1st District of Iowa.
Yeah, I assume that the Iowa one's heading to a recount. I believe it's really close.
Yes, that one is going to a recount.
Yeah, the representative there, Republican, is always surviving by the smallest of small margins. So,
I believe those are the only ones that are outstanding.
Yeah, I think at the end of the day, I think what we should expect here is 220 Republicans in the House, 215 Democrats, coupled with that 53-47 majority for Republicans in the Senate. However, at least temporarily, with Trump stealing a couple of representatives for his cabinet, more on that later, and then the Gates saga, more on that later as well, for at least the time being, it'll be 217 Republicans, 215 Democrats, which means Republicans will not be able to lose a single vote in the House.
Yeah,
And if you
and
know anything about Mike Johnson's ability to control his caucus, that's going to be a struggle.
yes, but I imagine they will get those replacements in fairly quickly.
Yeah. I do not want to spend too much time, Charlie, talking about why Harris lost and why Trump won this
Yes,
election.
we did briefly touch on that on a live stream, which we didn't end up uploading because our
The
audio
audio
decided
was,
to just completely not work.
yeah, we also recorded it after not sleeping for like 24 hours,
I
so
slept an hour.
you slept for like an hour. But what I will say, just to touch on it briefly, is that hindsight is very much 2020. And a lot of people said before the election, if with the campaign that Harris won, if she, or that Harris ran, if she doesn't win the election, there was nothing that the Democratic Party could do to win the election. And I think a couple things are true. It is okay to look back on that and say, what can we do differently next time? But I think it is unfair with the amount of analysis that there was that was essentially saying what I just stated, to bash the Harris campaign for their decisions. Look, there were some mistakes that they made, very evidently. They got crushed. It's nowhere near the landslide we originally thought. It's really close in the end, but they lost all the battleground states.
And every single state swung further for the
Yeah,
Republicans than it did in 2020.
exactly. In fact, I think every county, yeah, I'm sorry, not every county, but I don't think that there was a single county that voted for Trump in 2020 and Harris in 2024. So, look, obviously there were mistakes made that we didn't pick up on. We should, you know, figure this out so that the Democrats are able to in the future run a better campaign against the Republicans. That does not mean that we need to mercilessly bash the Harris campaign team for not spotting what nobody else seemed to spot. The other thing is that no, this election does not mean that you should throw the most vulnerable to the people in the country, such as trans people, to the side to make yourself look more appealing. That's not what that means. Look, it's clear that the Trump ads about attacking trans people worked, but let's stop pretending that Harris lost because she played into like the trans culture war. She didn't talk about it. I think maybe you could argue she should have talked about it and defended those people and see how that worked. Like Andy Bashir and have actually had great success running on things like this. Like maybe it's actually worth talking about more than we think. However, you can't throw these people to the side. Like you have to protect the most vulnerable people. Any other comments on some fallout from the election, Charlie?
No, that's you've put it very well. Now let's get to a little bit more international news. Actually, first let's talk about Trump's appointees. We touched briefly on Matt Gaetz and the whole disaster that he has been.
Yeah,
but
so
the rest of his nominees have been interesting, shall we say, such
yeah.
as RFK Jr. for health. And you know what, Colin? You know, why don't we just go through the list?
Yeah, so I want to start with Gates because for those who aren't following this closely, nominated by Trump, then resigned from Congress the same day because of the ethics report that was about to be released that was essentially said yes, he slept with underage girls, which is for obvious reasons very problematic. he ended up withdrawing his name from Attorney General because he knew he couldn't be confirmed, which shows that at least the smallest of small guardrails are still at least somewhat in place. So he's gone. He's done. Is he going to run for governor of Florida in 2026? Yeah, he probably is. But for now, he's done. He's out of office. He doesn't currently have power. He's not going to have power over the Justice Department. That is a good thing. The replacement is the Attorney General or former Attorney General of Florida, Pam Bondi. Huge election denier there. No surprise, wants to use the Justice Department to go after Trump's political opponents. Again, this is what you get when you vote for Trump. It was never about the economy, right? Like he doesn't care about that. Like maybe that's why you voted for him because the price of eggs was too high, but that's not what he's focused on. You get all of this if you voted for him. If you're a Latino and you voted for him because of the economy, then you can't be mad when he deports you. I'm sorry, you just can't. If you voted for him, you own all of this. Now some of his other appointments, Charlie, it seems to be the sex offender party, which makes a lot of sense. Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth. He's known for really only one thing, which is being an anchor on Fox News, so not qualified to run the military. He does believe that women shouldn't hold combat roles, which is not good. Um, Also has sexual assault allegations against him, because of course he does. So does RFK Jr., who's going to run the health department. Charlie, I want to talk more about that RFK Jr. appointment.
All right, go ahead.
We've kind of failed on our commitment to mention the brainworm every time we talk about him, but I think that's because there's more important and interesting aspects to him. But I do just want to say the new defense secretary, sorry, the new health secretary has a worm in his brain. And look,
That's not ideal.
this appointment is dangerous for a lot of reasons. For his opinions on fluoride in water, on processed foods, for his position on vaccines. He, in a lot of ways, led to the death of over 80 people in Samoa due to measles. Is that what it's going to look like here? Because, like, what's the vaccination scene going to look like in the United States? Like, that scares the hell out of me, and I think it should scare the hell out of everyone.
Yes, I think it should. Should we talk about Musk? Why don't?
Yeah, let's talk about the Department of Government Efficiency, as they're calling it.
Which happens to be run by two people, interestingly enough.
Yeah, that doesn't sound very efficient. Elon Musk, Vivek Ramaswamy, Doge, as they're calling it, because of course they're look. Elon Musk tweeted this as a meme on Twitter like several months ago, and now it's become a real thing. Like it's the meme office. That's what it is. I'm sorry, it is. So I don't even know what to think of. I don't think they're actually going to be able to do much. To me, this is the Trump's chief of staff, Susie Wiles, saying Trump's in love with Musk. We got to give him something that'll keep him out of the West Wing. So here's this. Are they actually going to cut like 50% of government jobs? Hopefully not. That would cut a lot, like hundreds of thousands of jobs. That seriously hurt the economy. Not that they care about that, but also, the government just can't run with those few people. Like, people actually have these jobs for a reason, and
Yeah.
these are career workers. But it's such a weird and stupid office.
Yes, one of the things that I do think is positive about Musk, though, is he does believe in climate change, which I do like. I think RFK does as well. And I think, at least in some regards, we maybe be able to get some clean energy projects going with that, potentially.
Well, I mean, we look at that, and then we look at like who he puts in charge of the Department of Energy and and Department of Interior and the EPA, and right, it's a ton of like oil executives and like climate change deniers, and that kind of offsets it. What I do think is interesting about the RFK thing is like RFK is pro-choice. Trump's going to have a problem with that coming from the right. So what he's done, I believe his assistant or the deputy health secretary or whatever it's called is like an staunch anti-choice advocate. So it balances out in the end. Some of these appointments, we won't get into everything. State Department Marco Rubio is important to get into. Charlie, national intelligence is going to be run by a Russian asset, Gabbard.
Yes, which is not necessarily a great thing.
No, it's not at all. Also, if you look at the diversity of his cabinet, it's non-existent. The only person of color is his housing secretary, Scott Turner. Some other interesting ones, if you can call it that. Medicare and Medicaid is going to be run by Dr. Oz, who, his whole thing is like scamming others out of their Medicare.
Yeah.
So, and then I think the two other interesting areas is foreign policy and immigration policy. Charlie, we're looking at one of the most pro-Israel cabinets we've seen, so hi all the people that boycotted voting because Harris wasn't pro-Gaza enough. Hope you like Mike Huckabee as the ambassador to Israel. Marco Rubio is the Secretary of State. Who else? National Security Advisor Michael Waltz. These are all super pro-Israel people. And then for immigration, a lot of people that are like the let's deport even U.S. citizens who are the kids of people that were brought here or that came here illegally. And people like Thomas Hahn as his borders are, and then Charlie, this one's fun. Kristi Noem, yes, the dog killer, as Homeland Security Secretary.
Oh, fun.
Yeah, so not great there. And then the other thing is all of the Project 2025 people that were brought in. FCC chairman Brendan Carr. Brendan Carr, who wrote the FCC chapter of Project 2025. People like one of the main creators of Project 2025, Russell Vought, is the nominee for the Office of Management Budget. This is like they are, as we told you before the election, they are very serious about Project 2025.
Yep.
All right. And then one other quickly.
World news.
One other quickly. Linda McMahon, the WWE person, is going to be the education secretary.
Oh, lovely. Lovely.
Again, every Trump supporter. I hope you enjoy the next 4 years, because I think at some point during them you'll realize if you can get out of the cult that you're in. I think that your life will be made worse by this. Like Trump's already said, first day in office, he's going to implement a 25% tariff on Canada and Mexico. Charlie, that's not going to go well for the U.S. economy.
Yep. No, it won't. All right. Shall we move on to the world events thing? We have some news out of the Middle East. Israel and Hezbollah have now agreed to a ceasefire, which will take effect in Lebanon, which is very good news, as it gives a chance for some respite for the Lebanese civilians in this who have been caught up in this conflict in southern Lebanon. The plan is for a 60-day ceasing of hostilities, which hopefully will then develop into a longer-lasting peace deal. And Israel has also asked, by the way, that Lebanese civilians do not return to those areas that are currently under fire if they have evacuated. And they have also stated that if there is any breach within the ceasefire, they will continue the actions that they had done previously.
Yep. And I believe this was in large part brokered by Biden and the United States.
Yes, this was very well done by him.
Yeah. Again, Biden has gotten a lot of things done during his presidency. You can knock him for things, but I think in general, people have Biden's kind of boring in a way. People haven't necessarily heard about what he's doing every single day, and I think that's a good thing, right? You don't want them to be doing nothing, obviously, and they're not. But you want them to be boring. Say what you will about the Trump administration, and there's a lot we can say about it, about the first Trump administration. It was not boring.
No, it certainly
You
wasn't.
woke up every morning and you wondered if Trump had accidentally started World War III with a tweet. Like, that's not something that happened in the Biden administration. They
No.
quietly got stuff done. And I feel like that's really valuable and just a really underrated aspect of his presidency.
Yeah, no, I absolutely agree.
Um, Charlie, do you have a stat for us this week?
Yes, I do. Um, in his playing career, quarterback Lamar Jackson of the Ravens has beaten every single current starting quarterback that is not a rookie in the NFC, bar one. Who is it?
Um,
He is he is 24-1 against the NFC. Which quarterback did he lose to?
wait, you're saying he's only lost to one. I was thinking maybe it's someone he hasn't played.
No, he's played everyone. There's only one team he has lost to. Who was their starting quarterback at the time?
that is a wild one. I was gonna say no, the Eagles, but no, he hasn't lost to the Eagles because they play this week, I believe. That's a good game coming
They
up this
do.
week. Um, oh boy. Give me a year, please.
I don't actually know the year, but I can tell you that he is no longer a starting quarterback.
Is he a quarterback in the league?
Yes, he is.
Oh wait, you're not gonna say it's like Daniel Jones or something.
It is in fact Daniel Jones.
What the hell? Okay,
It
that's the best stat you've pulled out.
it is indeed Daniel Jones. I'm getting better with these.
You know, that's your best stat of the week by miles.
All right, let's move on. College football. Everything is on fire. What happened?
Yeah, so
Because everyone that was supposed to win, that would like basically clinch their way into the playoffs, didn't win, and now the Big 12 has no idea what it's doing, and there's about a billion tiebreakers.
yeah, so look, we haven't recorded in like 3 weeks. We're obviously not going to go through 3 weeks of games. We'll go through this past week's games. We'll talk a lot about the playoff scenarios and then how next week or how rivalry week can impact that. And there's the rivalry week's going to be awesome, man. Like there's so many good rivalries, historic rivalries. But this past week, Charlie, like I don't even know what to say. I think let's start with kind of the two games going into the week that we thought were the best games, and neither of them really turned out to be good games. We're talking Ohio State, Indiana, and we're talking Notre Dame, Army. Look, I'm not surprised that Notre Dame crushed Army. Army, sure they were undefeated, but they never were. They like never played a difficult opponent. And they weren't necessarily winning all their games by miles. Like to me, they were just a better than average American athletic conference team, and that's fine. Like that's a step up for Army, but they looked completely outmatched by Notre Dame.
They really did.
And then the other big one, that Ohio State Indiana game. I I mean, look, it was in Columbus. I kind of expected that Indiana might get crushed and that we could have like a serious conversation about whether they belonged in the playoffs. And unless they got like seriously destroyed, I was always going to come down on the side of yes, they belong in the playoff. Why? Because they've beaten everyone that they're supposed to beat, which most teams haven't done, and they've beat them all by a lot. And they've lost to a really good team, and that's still the case. Like Ohio State looks like arguably the best team in the country. Charlie, I think we're in agreement. In some order, the best two teams in the country are Oregon and Ohio State, and they're the best by miles.
Well, Washington has the chance to change that on Saturday. They
It's not
won't.
happening. It's not happening. We'll get into next week soon,
Well, we'll
but
see.
yeah, but I mean, Indiana came out the gate looking really strong, right? Quick three and out, great drive down the field, um, and then after that, it wasn't great. It was they just looked like the worst team. And when this game ended, I said, I think they've done enough that they should make the playoff. I don't think the committee is going to agree with me. Well, then, Charlie, the rest of the day happened.
Yep. And you go through real quick before you say anything, do the Big 12, and then I'm going to do the tiebreaker scenarios because I found a source that has all the information on it.
Yeah. Big 12. So BYU and Colorado were in pole position to make the Big 12 championship, which was ultimately going to be a game for the automatic bid to the playoff, and everyone else is going to, right? One problem. Colorado got dunked on by Kansas, who's, by the way, can we talk about Kansas? Because they've now won 3 straight games versus ranked teams. They were 2-6, they're now 5-6 after beating Iowa State, BYU, and Colorado.
Impressive.
Kansas is the hottest team in the country. And then Arizona State beat BYU. And Charlie, before we get to the tiebreaker scenarios, can we talk about the ending of this game?
Go ahead.
So, first of all, Kenny Dillingham is a great coach, should probably be the coach of the year. It's either him or Nettie. I don't really care which one you pick. But what was he doing? You've got it.
I don't know.
You've got it at what? Third and goal, second and goal at the like 3, and you run backwards to the 50 to try to burn time, and then you don't burn off enough, and you end up turning the ball over with 1 second left. But oh yeah, your fans think it's over and storm the field and take the goalposts down.
Yep.
And by the way, what a week it was for field stormings.
Oh, absolutely.
I mean, never seen anything quite like it. Now, Arizona State, definitely never seen anything like what happened there at the end of that one. But Charlie, before we get to the SEC,
yes, here I have the tiebreaker scenarios for you, by the way.
Yeah.
So in a 3-team tie, we would have a 3-team tie scenario if Colorado, in a 3-team tie, if Colorado loses, it would be Arizona State, Iowa State. If Arizona State loses, it would be Iowa State, BYU. If Arizona State loses, yeah, it would be Iowa State, BYU. If Iowa State loses, it would be Arizona State, BYU. If BYU loses, Texas Tech beats West Virginia, Baylor beats Kansas, and Cincinnati beats TCU. That's how Colorado gets in against Iowa State. If that doesn't happen, if one of those doesn't happen, it would be Colorado versus Arizona State. And if BYU loses and West Virginia beats Texas Tech, then it would be Arizona State, Iowa State.
And real quick, if between Arizona State, BYU, Colorado, and Iowa State, if exactly 2 of them win this week, then those 2 go to the Big 12 championship. If all 4 win, Arizona State and Iowa State go to the Big 12 championship. The scenario that I like the most, Charlie, though, and I don't think it's going to happen, but my favorite scenario is if all of them lose. If all of them lose, then it opens up a world of possibilities. You're looking at potentially a combination of Kansas State, Baylor, Texas Tech, West Virginia, and no, I think just those 4 making the conference championship game.
How?
I mean,
how did we let this happen?
There is a non-zero chance that we get an 8-way tie at 6-3 in the conference standings. And
how?
It's pretty simple. I'm not saying it's likely.
I don't know how we allowed this to happen.
Yeah, I'm saying it's simple. Arizona State loses to Arizona. BYU loses to Houston. Iowa State loses to Kansas State. Colorado loses to Oklahoma State, which is the least likely of all of them. Baylor beats, I think they're playing Kansas. TCU would have to beat whoever they're playing, which is Cincinnati, and then the winner of Texas Tech, West Virginia.
Huh.
And that's how you would get an 8-way tie.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well then, shall we get to the rivalry week preview?
Well, let's talk about the SEC games.
Oh yes.
The
SEC.
ridiculous game in Auburn at Jordan Hare. Jordan Hare is Jordan Herring.
Yes. Alabama's dead.
Um, yes, but so Auburn beats A&M in 4 overtimes. Alabama, Charlie, it's not just that they lost. They looked lifeless.
They also lost to
24-3
Oklahoma.
against Oklahoma. Are you kidding me?
It is the least points. I was considering this to be my stat, but I decided to go with the Daniel Jones one. This is the least points that Alabama has scored in a football game since 2004.
Yeah.
That's bad.
Yeah, that's bad. And then the other one was Ole Miss, right? Ole Miss walking into the playoffs potentially. No, they lose to Florida. And I mean, credit to Billy Napier for turning his team around. I'll give you a quick uh, peek behind the curtain into my process on the coaches I was going to fire. Billy Napier was on my list for most of the season. The way he's been able to turn his team around in the last couple of weeks has taken him off of that list. And I mean, let's remember, um, there was a lot of talk early in the season of Florida firing Billy Napier, replacing him with Lane Kiffin. Now Napier beats Lane Kiffin to essentially knock Ole Miss out of the playoff conversation. We'll talk about that more in a couple minutes about the playoff conversation. But I mean, what a job by Florida! And I mean, Ole Miss, their losses now: Kentucky, LSU, and Florida. That's bad.
That sounds like a Pittsburgh Steelers kind of loss thing.
Yeah, I mean, look, Ole Miss's schedule, as SEC schedules go, was fairly easy. They had a decent draw this year. I mean, obviously the game against Georgia, we thought the game against LSU would be their second hardest game. It ended up being the game against South Carolina. Right? They won their 2 hardest games. That's not the problem with. And when you look at the playoff conversation for them, you can't just be like, oh, sure that they have a bunch of losses, but that's because they played a difficult schedule. That's not the case because they didn't lose to their difficult schedule. They lost to some bad SEC teams.
Yes, they did.
So now let's talk about the college football playoff and scenarios. I think we're in agreement, Charlie. Oregon and Ohio State are in no matter what.
If Oregon loses to Washington, then no. But I think that's not really.
If they lose to Washington, then you think that they'd have to then. Well, they'd have to then lose the Big Ten championship to Ohio State. But
yes, but I think if they lose to Washington, I think they will lose. They're going to lose to Ohio State.
Yeah, I still don't think it's enough. I just think they've proven enough, right? They've beaten a really good Ohio State team. I just think Oregon has done enough.
Yeah, they're not going to win the national championship because it's Oregon, but
I mean, this is their best shot, though.
This is their best shot since last year.
Yeah, well, and it's probably gonna be their best shot for a while. Like,
Yes.
I'm not saying they're not going to be a good team going forward, but this might be the best that they get.
Yes. So going into rivalry week, we have the classics. We have the game.
Well, sure. Let's finish the playoff talk.
Oh yeah, fine.
Texas, I think, is in. Right? We can say, oh, what their schedules got better because Florida and Oklahoma picked up a couple big wins. Right, their schedule has improved, and they can only lose one more game. So the most losses they could have is 2. Because if they lose to A&M this week, then they don't make the SEC championship game. If they beat A&M, then the only other loss could be to Georgia and the SEC champion. So I think they're in, no matter what. And then I gotta say, I think even if Penn State loses to Maryland, I think they're in. Yes, their schedule hasn't been easy. They have played.
They almost lost to Minnesota.
No, they've almost lost to a lot of teams, but the thing is, they have beat 5 Power 4 bowl eligible teams. No one else can say that, I don't think. So, to me, even if they lose to Maryland, I think they're in. And I wasn't going to say that last week. And I mean, last week I was at the place where I think it matters how Penn State wins. But after all the chaos this week, I don't think that's the case anymore. For me, For me, Indiana should be in unless they lose to Purdue, right? If they lose to Purdue, they should be out.
Yes.
I mean, if anyone loses to Purdue, they should be out. But Charlie, I posted this take on Twitter a couple days ago. Indiana should be ranked higher than Notre Dame. Tell me why I'm wrong.
I mean, no, you are fully right. A loss to Northern Illinois, I think, is a lot more destructive than a single loss to the number 2 ranked team in the country.
Exactly. And the other point on that is, well, people will say, Notre Dame's schedule's harder. Is it? As of right now, Indiana's strength of schedule is better by like 20 spots above Notre Dame. And you're like, well, Notre Dame has the ranked wins. Do they? They have a ranked win against Army, except that Army's not ranked anymore. And they have a ranked win against Texas A&M that if Texas A&M loses to Texas this week, will no longer be a ranked win. Notre Dame has a good shot of having no ranked wins at the end of it. Notre Dame is getting far too much credit, I think, for wins against teams that at the time were ranked, but their season has completely flamed out since then.
Yeah.
And then, like you said, Charlie, Indiana lost to Ohio State. You know who Notre Dame lost to? Northern Illinois. That is by miles the worst loss of anybody in the playoff conversation. And yet the committee right now seems primed to give them a home playoff game. If it is a home playoff game, there should be debate of whether they should make the playoffs at all. I think ultimately, given where we're at the moment, if they beat USC, they should.
Yes,
but they should be one of the last teams in.
Northern Illinois is in the MAC. They're not even good in the MAC. They are 7th.
Yeah. They're 7th in the MAC. You lost to them. At home. Like, let's not forget that either. It was in South Bend. Like, what are we just pretending that didn't happen? Because
yes.
I hear takes that, they should be ranked higher than Penn State. Why? Why should they be ranked higher than Penn State? Give me one why this is a better team than Penn State. Penn State's strength of schedule is better. Penn State's loss is miles and miles and miles better.
Yes, it is.
It doesn't make Notre Dame is one Texas A&M loss away from not having a good win. On top of the worst loss in the country.
It just doesn't make sense, does it?
No, it does not add up. As for some of the other teams, Charlie, I think a 3-loss Georgia, if that third Georgia loss comes in the SEC championship game, I think at this point that probably still puts them in. A&M still has a path to the SEC championship game if they beat Texas. That's the only way they get in is with the auto bid. And then the ACC, well, Big 12 is going to be a one-bid league. We've discussed the Big 10, which should get 4 teams. We've discussed it's going to be Boise State out of the group of 5 if they win out. I think Tulane has an outside shot if they don't. But the ACC, Charlie, do they have a chance at 2 bids?
The AAC?
No, the ACC. The committee rankings right now.
Maybe
just came out Tuesday afternoon. Have Miami at 6
and Clemson at 12.
Yeah, Clemson at 12 and SMU at 9.
Yes. SMU. Okay. Because those two are right next to each other, whoever wins, they're both getting in unless something catastrophically goes wrong with if it's a close game, yes. If one of them blows the other one out, then no.
Well, but there's a whole other layer on this, Charlie, that we're not considering, which is that SMU's in the conference championship game no matter what.
Yes.
However, and I think they'll take care of business against Cal this week. However, Miami's not. If Miami wins that game, then they are in. If they beat Syracuse, then they're in. If they lose, though, Miami does not make the conference championship game. So they finish at 10-2 with losses to Syracuse and Georgia Tech. Clemson would make the conference championship game, whether they lose to South Carolina or because that's not a conference game.
Yeah.
So for me, I think Miami has to win this week in order to make the playoff. I think that if they win this week, their spot's probably secure. SMU, they don't have the brand recognition, so that's gonna hurt them. I think also they could be secure, but then wild. Look, Clemson. I'm sorry, Clemson should not be ranked ahead of the three-loss SEC teams, especially not yet. If they beat South Carolina, then there's a conversation. But Alabama and LSU also, sorry, Alabama and Ole Miss also have that win over South. But it comes down to Alabama and Ole Miss beat Georgia, and Clemson got blown out by Georgia. So, however, they already put Clemson ahead of those teams, and if they beat South Carolina, that should only strengthen that case. So I'm not entirely sure how the committee could reverse that. So I feel like if Clemson beats South Carolina, then they have a chance too. So yeah, so Charlie, I'm not entirely sure what to make of it then. If Clemson ends up beating South Carolina, do they have a shot? Because I don't see a world where we get three ACC teams in the field. That just doesn't seem practical to me. But like,
No,
who are you leaving?
I think you would need someone like Indiana to lose, or Penn State to lose, or Georgia to
Yeah.
lose.
Well, is there a conversation about Clemson versus Indiana? Like, I don't think so. But I think that's a conversation that a lot of Clemson had.
See, I think. Well, I think is Clemson not currently in that final transfer spot?
They're the first team out because they're currently ranked 12, but remember the Big 12 champion would be ahead of them because they're ranked 16, but they're the highest. They're one of the five highest ranked conference.
Oh yeah, yes, yeah. So who it's the five highest conference champions to go through?
Five highest, yep, and then the seven at-large bids.
Okay, so pretty much it's going to be the seven other teams, along with whoever wins the Big Ten, whoever wins the SEC, whoever wins the ACC, whoever wins. What would the other two be?
Mountain West probably, and then the Big 12. But remember, like the Big 10 champion is like almost certainly already in the field. SEC champion might be, or it could be Texas A&M, which throw a wrench in a lot of things. The one thing I don't see is I think South Carolina is going to beat Clemson this week, but I don't think that they can move up because I think they're kind of blocked by Alabama and Ole Miss, who both
I
also
think,
have three losses but beat them.
Colin, I think the other sneaky team that is further down than I
Yeah.
think they should be, but I
Uh-huh.
think still has a chance. I really do want to see what happens with the AAC.
Yeah, so look, I don't fully see a world where we get two group of five teams in because that would essentially mean that the Big 12 flame out even more. If we get to the scenario where like, West Virginia somehow wins the Big 12, then it's possible. But besides that, I don't think that they could both make it. But there could absolutely be a world where Tulane wins the AAC championship. Boise State loses to UNLV in the Mountain West Championship, then I think instead of Boise State.
Yeah, because I think that Tulane team is pretty good.
They're good. They're good. They are a good team. And
Yeah,
this wouldn't even be a conversation if they hadn't lost on a suspect call, to put it mildly, to Kansas State early in the season.
yeah, that's the thing that's really hurting them. Because other than that, they have been very good.
Yeah, no, they've been a good team.
And it's a real shame that SMU left that conference because that could be a real solid conference.
Yeah. Do want to talk about something in regards to the three lost SEC teams, okay? I don't care what order you rank Alabama and Ole Miss in. There's a case to put either one in front of the other. But who cares? Why is this even a discussion about whether they could still make the college football playoff? They have lost, like, sure, they played a tough schedule. They've beaten a couple good teams, sort of. I mean, I get you. Both of their two best wins are Georgia and South Carolina. That's legit. That's better than a lot of other teams. What are we forgetting in that? Alabama lost to Tennessee. Okay, that's a good loss. They also lost to Vanderbilt and Oklahoma. Ole Miss lost to LSU, Kentucky, and Florida. There's no good wins there. I'm sorry, you cannot even contemplate putting really any of the teams that are currently in the field over them. I get having them like as one of the first teams out because there's not a lot of better options, but the gap should be big. There really should not be a way other than something huge blowing up like Indiana losing to Purdue, for example, for any of them to get in the field. There shouldn't be a conversation to me about, oh, does a two-loss SMU that loses the ACC championship game get in over them? The answer is yes. And I I hear the argument from SEC fans. Well, it's the best teams, it's not the most deserving teams. Okay, but um best based on what? Based on what happens on the field, based on what we've seen out of them in the regular season. And again, the SEC is undefeated in hypothetical scenarios, of course, because of course they are. But like, I sometimes I hear some analysts going like, well, like what happens on the field, like it has to count for something. No, what happens on the field has to count for everything. Sure, it matters like who the teams are that you beat and lose to. It doesn't just matter that you win and lose. But you know what doesn't matter? Who I think might beat someone else. Because who am I to say? It's just my own bias. Like it has to come down to who actually is winning on the field. Like you sure, maybe Alabama would be favored over SMU. Okay, Alabama's also lost to Vanderbilt. Like best based on what? If it's based on what happened on the field, you're not a great team when you lose to really bad teams. And you can't just say, oh, but it's just because of the SEC is so deep. Whenever any other conference cannibalizes itself, like the SEC is doing this year, it's always, oh, there's just no elite teams in the conference. Maybe there's just not an elite team in the SEC this year. Maybe there just isn't. And that's okay. You're still going to get multiple playoff teams, without a doubt. And you should. You're a good conference. You have some good teams. But to say, oh, well, 3-loss Alabama should be in, is frankly one of the most ridiculous things I've ever heard. The argument for it does not exist when you lose to the teams that they have lost to. The hypotheticals they go away. I don't want to hear the argument of, well, how would they do if they played Indiana's schedule? I don't really care because sure you can claim, oh well, they would have gone defeated, but here's the problem with that. Indiana has beaten some teams better than some of the teams Alabama has to. So the argument really goes out the window. I'm sorry. It's I think that there's a non-zero chance that Alabama or Ole Miss makes the playoffs, and it infuriates me because neither of them have on the field this year proven that they belong.
Yeah.
All right, Charlie. It's the greatest week in the world. Why?
It's rivalry week.
It's rivalry week. There are no two better days of football on the calendar than Black Friday and whatever we call the Saturday after Thanksgiving. It's the greatest. Charlie, let's run through this. Let's start on Friday. Some of the games. State, a big game against Oregon State, who Charlie just won the Pac-12 this week.
Oh yeah, you're right. They did.
Yeah, Wazoo went down. There's some rivalries that are, what?
They couged themselves again.
Yeah. There's some rivalries this on Black Friday that are kind of irrelevant, but for the college football landscape, but important to the teams playing them, obviously. Nebraska, Iowa. Hey, Nebraska's bowl eligible, first time in a long time. Utah, UCF's not really a rivalry, but Georgia Tech. I think Georgia's going to win that comfortably. They need to too, and at that point, I think you have to put them over too because Miami losses to Georgia Tech.
Kansas State, Iowa State should be good.
Yeah, that's on Saturday, but Colorado or Oklahoma State. Colorado, I'm sorry. Oklahoma State's bad. They're just people pick them to win the Big 12 this year. They're just a bad team. And then the Egg Bowl, Charlie, on Friday, normally on Thanksgiving. If Ole Miss has any shot at the playoff, they have to beat Mississippi State. They should. Mississippi State is very, very bad, but I mean, we'll see. And then Charlie, then we get to Saturday,
Oh yeah.
and let's start in the noon Eastern window with the game. Ohio State's looking to take out 3 years of Michigan ruining them. They're looking to take out 3 years. I'd argue, Charlie, that Ryan Day is coach. For the first time in his career at Ohio State, I believe he's.
If Ohio State loses this game, he should be fired immediately.
You cannot lose to Michigan 4 straight years.
No, and if your team is like this, you cannot let that happen.
Especially when Michigan is like they are this year.
Yes.
And I expect that Ohio State will take care of business.
I don't know. It's Ohio State.
Yeah, I mean, there is something to be said about Ryan Day the game differently, but does it matter that the talent level is so different?
Yes. Also in that 9 a.m. Pacific window, noon Eastern. Also South Carolina Clemson. That'll be a big game.
Yeah, Charlie. To me, this game right here, South Carolina Clemson, it's not necessarily the most important game of the week, but I think that it has huge implications potentially on one of these teams maybe sneaking their way into the playoff. And also, I just think it's the best game of the week.
Yeah. Also in the other game in that window, Illinois Northwestern.
Yeah, who cares?
Moving to the next window, then we have the Iron
Charlie,
Bowl.
Wait, Charlie. There's a game in this window that we're not talking about. Tennessee Vanderbilt.
Oh, yes.
I just want to put this out there. I think Vanderbilt's going to win this game.
Oh, I really do. I would love that.
Charlie, if this happens, do you know what this does to the college football playoff?
Oh, it breaks everything.
Yeah, I don't. There's not a good answer. I mean, we're probably seeing multiple 3-loss SEC scenario. This would create chaos, but I truly believe it could happen.
Yep.
And elsewhere in this window, Louisville, Kentucky, not really playing for as much. Duke, Wake Forest, same thing there. Kansas, Baylor, West Virginia, Texas Tech. Looking, I mean, some smaller schools. Louisiana versus ULM. Eastern Michigan, Western Michigan, which is, by the way, a battle for to be bowl eligible. But then the next window, Charlie, you've got smaller games like Penn State, Maryland, Boston College, Pitt. But then you've got a couple interesting games here that catch my eye. First of them, Charlie, Notre Dame, USC. Big rivalry. We're not thinking much of USC this year, but they've been in the game that they've played. Can they deal a fatal blow to Notre Dame?
I would love that.
Can it happen, though?
No.
Okay.
I don't think so. I just don't think they have enough.
I think it could get scary for Notre Dame, but I think they survive. We talked about the implications of Miami, Syracuse. We talked about what the SMU Cal game means to SMU.
We've been talking about college football for 30 minutes.
Sure. We've talked about Arizona State, what that game against Arizona means to them.
Iron Bowl.
Arkansas, Missouri doesn't matter that much. Neither does Rutgers, Michigan State, or North Carolina, NC State. Like you said, though, Charlie, the Iron Bowl. Auburn has not won that game in Tuscaloosa since 2010. In fact, I don't think it's been within single digits since 2010.
Yes.
Can they do that? Can they win this game this year?
Yes, I think they can. And also, if they do, it finishes off any fleeting hopes that Alabama has of making the playoffs.
Yeah. So, I mean, Alabama's different at Bryant-Denny, right? They're a different team.
Yes.
I think Auburn could win this. I don't think they will. I think it's possible.
I think they could too. And then in that and then in the late window, We have Purdue, Indiana. Doesn't really matter unless Purdue manages to sneak out a win, which they very likely won't.
Yeah.
Texas, very likely to put away Texas A&M for the
Well, I mean,
year.
I don't, Charlie, this is a rivalry that's like maybe the second best in college football behind um, Michigan, Ohio State, and people forget that because it hasn't been played in like almost 15 years.
Texas versus A&M.
Yeah,
Yeah,
and
it is a great one.
the implications are huge. Winner goes to the SEC champion. That's
Oh,
the
you're right.
situation. That's the situation.
Wait, hang on. Just would Texas go as well if they lose and Georgia loses?
No, because Georgia's game is not a conference game.
Oh yeah, good point. Is
You
Georgia
mentioned
locked in?
yeah, Georgia's locked in. Yeah, you mentioned Kansas State, Iowa State. Charlie, we've talked about Washington, Oregon. There's one game that we're forgetting in this window.
And that be
Florida State.
oh yeah, the mid bowl.
Is Florida State mid? Do they get that title? Do they get to be
Mid
called mid?
versus okay, the bad bowl.
Yeah, exactly. The bad bowl. All right. That finishes up a large college football segment for now because we'll come back to my coaches' rankings. Charlie, since we spent so much time on football already, let's speed run the NFL.
Okay, so since we last left off, the Seahawks kind of figured out how to play football. The NFC North might be unstoppable. The Chiefs lost and then almost lost again to the Panthers. The Jets are on fire. The Giants are completely on fire, and they also got rid of Daniel Jones. The AFC South decided to be weird because the Texans decided that they wanted to lose more. The Steelers decided to lose to the Browns. The Chargers look pretty decent. So does Denver. Philadelphia absolutely obliterated LA. San Francisco is completely cooked. Arizona might be cooked as well. The Rams might also be completely cooked. The NFC is pretty bad. The Bears are really, really bad. The Cowboys managed to win one of the stupidest games I've ever seen.
That was
And
the
the
most
Vegas Raiders
insane
are gonna get
football game. That was hilarious. Charlie, 20-9 with 3:03 left in the game. 34-26, the final score in regulation.
yes. That miracle drive they get, and then the missed extra point, and then the onside kick as a 3-play trio was beautiful.
It was the greatest thing I've ever watched.
Oh no, it was simply incredible.
Yeah. All right. Couple thoughts just generally on the NFL picture here. Charlie, convince me that the Detroit Lions are not going to the Super Bowl.
No, they are. I mean, if you look at who's left in the actual contenders, or really not even really contenders in the NFC, I mean, it's Philadelphia. It's maybe Washington if they can figure out how to get going again.
Yeah, I mean,
Detroit,
they're in a bad streak right now.
yes. Detroit, maybe Minnesota if they can stop winning, if they can stop having really close games with the Bears. Green Bay, Atlanta is not a contender. Seattle, unfortunately, is also not a contender.
Yeah. I mean, I do got to give like props to the NFC North. Like the top three teams in that division are really good, and Bears.
Yes. If the season were to end today, I really like Seahawks Packers as a playoff game.
I don't know. So we're seeing these teams on Sunday night for weeks in Seattle. Yeah, like 3 weeks from now. So I think that's a fun game.
Yeah, Seattle has 3 games in 4 weeks against the NFC North.
That's scary.
Yes. 2 of them on primetime.
Yeah, one of them shouldn't be on prime time. That's a whole nother.
Is that the Bears game?
That might. Is there a better game that week that they could flex in?
I think that's week 16. Let me check.
Yeah, No, it's week 17, isn't it? No, it's not. It's one of these weeks. Which week is it?
It is week 17.
Oh, it is 17. Okay.
That's the weird Wednesday night football on Christmas. Or Wednesday day game.
Yeah. It's Thursday. Oh, so they'd have to flex it by now, I think, because it's
Yes,
Thursday.
they would. And I'm looking at it. Looking at it, the only game that I could see flexing is Packers Vikings.
Yeah, I think, and they'd have to make that decision like now. And remember
Yes.
that the major networks each get to protect one game, but I assume Fox is protecting Dallas Philly that week. So
I'm sure they are. But also, real quick,
Miami Cleveland could
watching
easily get flexed out of Sunday night.
watching Lions Niners on Monday Night Football is going to be amazing.
Yes. Charlie, the Bills are about to lock up that division.
That division is abysmal.
Charlie, Aaron Rodgers is done in New York after this year, to which every Jets fan says hooray. And
And the
beyond that,
Vikings are starting to be very concerned about where he's going next.
yeah. And beyond that, I don't even have that much else to say. I thought you summed up the NFL pretty well so far.
Yes. Just the team, just that I real quick wanted to highlight. What is Baltimore doing?
Yeah. Who did they lose to this week? Oh, sorry, no, they beat the Chargers.
They
But
didn't exactly make it easy. And the other thing, I
no,
know I know I touched on this already, but what is going on in the NFC West?
it's mid. It's a pile of mid.
I thought that was the South job in the NFC,
That's all the divisions at this.
except the North.
So here's my thing, right? Parity is good, but not too much. Like, I think you want parity in the sense of like the same team is good, but I don't think you want parity in the sense of all the teams are like 9-8 or 8-9.
No, and that might just be what happens in the NFC.
Yeah.
And the other, because the issue is the AFC is super top heavy.
Yeah.
Because if you look at it, there are 3 teams in the AFC, and
Yeah.
there's the Bills, there's the Chiefs, and then there's one of Chargers, Ravens, or Steelers.
Yeah.
But we are on a crash course for Bills Chiefs part 4.
It's gonna be amazing.
Yes,
Like,
and
you could give me a Bills Chiefs playoff game every year.
well,
And
I think
the
we're
other-
going to get that every year.
And the other thing that we forget is both these teams are going to end up meeting in the regular.
Yeah, since they keep winning their division, they're going to keep meeting in the regular season every year.
The Bills are fine at winning those games.
Yes, it's the playoff games where they have trouble with coin tosses.
They have trouble with a lot more than just.
Yes, they also seem to love missing field goals when it actually matters.
Exactly. Did want to touch on college basketball feast this week. The Maui Invitational has been the greatest of all time.
Unless you're from Connecticut.
UConn's been a nightmare. And by the way, Dan Hurley's conduct has. I'm sorry, it's not defensible. But UConn might go 0-3. We'll see. I think they can beat Dayton, but I thought they could beat Memphis, and I thought they could beat Colorado. But beyond Maui, which has produced a great game in almost every single one of them, of the first 8 games, it looks like at least 5 of them are going to end up being top-tier games. Beyond Maui, we had the Vegas showdown, Kansas and Duke. That was a great game. But now Duke, second loss of the year. They've lost to Kansas. Was fine. Alabama beat Houston in overtime. Another really, really good game on this Tuesday. No, college hoops are fun. And
They always are.
Well, it's a reminder. Don't start watching college hoops in March, because there's good stuff before then. My general for college hoops is I don't watch much until football's over, except for Thanksgiving week, because of all the tournaments like the Maui Invitational and so on. But Gonzaga has some fun games coming up against Kentucky and against UConn, right? There are top tier showdowns early in the season. There's some really, really quality games. Don't start watching in March. It's good. Charlie, Formula One, and then we'll get to the long-awaited.
All right, yes, Formula One returns back again to Vegas for the street race. Again, the second year around Las Vegas.
Did it go better this year, safety-wise?
Yes, we had no manholes destroying car floors this time.
That's a good thing.
Coming into this race, the Drivers' Championship had not yet been won. In order to keep his hopes alive, Lando Norris had to outscore Max Verstappen. It would be George Russell who would win the race for Mercedes, followed by teammate Lewis Hamilton in second. Helping Mercedes a little bit in the constructors, they're kind of in a no man's land, and they're very likely going to finish fourth. would be Carlos Sainz rounding out the podium for Ferrari. Is a Ferrari 3-4 with McLaren fourth. Verstappen beats out Norris 5-6, giving him his fourth world championship, fourth in a row. It would be the other McLaren of Oscar Piastri. And seventh, Nico Hülkenberg for Haas gets 4 points, bringing them to sixth place in the championship, ahead of Alpine by 1 point. That's a battle to watch for the end of the year. And only 3 points behind them now is Racing Bulls, the former technically second or Red Bull team that is now technically independent, but not really. Speaking of Red Bull, it'll be 10th place for Sergio Perez as his disaster of a season continues. We had 2 DNFs, Pierre Gasly for Alpine, who started...
Of course it was Alpine.
Who started third on the grid after a great qualifying, only to have his engine fall out from underneath him, and Alex Albon in the Williams, as Williams decides that they just don't want to have race cars anymore. We have 2 more races left. We have 2 more races left in the 2024 season at Qatar this weekend, and then we head to Abu Dhabi to round out the season before we head into what is set to be a very competitive 2025 season.
So I would say Verstappen is not the favorite to win 5 in a row, right?
No, he definitely is not with Red Bull is going. But the big news from F1 was not that the championship was decided. That was decided a while ago. It is that we now have officially 11 Formula One teams.
Is that starting next year?
That is starting in 2026 with the new regulations coming in. General Motors Cadillac will be joining
the U.S.-owned team.
Yes, it is another U.S.-owned team. They will be joining the grid in 2026 with help from Mario Andretti. The grid now expands from 10 teams to 11 and from 20 drivers to 22.
All right, let's move on. And Charlie, are you ready for the long-awaited segment here on the C&C Talks podcast?
Let's do it.
All right, so as you may know or may not, I explained it a little bit at the beginning of the show. I like to call for coaches' jobs, like way too much, some people would say. And I'm going to do that again. I am going to list the top 10 coaches in college football that I believe should lose their jobs following the end of this season. And the one thing you should know, a lot of coaches have at some point this year made it onto this list only for me to take them off. Generally, a single win won't take them off the list. You have to really turn your team around in some way. Like I think Billy Napier has done. I think Ryan Day has done it enough to get him off the list. He was on it after they lost again because it's a big game. He's won a couple this year. And then there's some people I had Mac Brown on my UNC took care of that this morning. They fired him. So I've replaced him. And Charlie, I think how we're going to do this is I'm going to go through it one at a time, 10 to 1 after each one. I'll give you a chance to give your comments, okay?
Yep, all right, let's do it.
All right. Starting with number 10, Dabo Swinney at Clemson.
Really?
That's right. I chose violence today. Yes, Clemson, under Dabo Swinney, has a history of winning, a pretty long history of winning. They have won multiple national championships under him and appeared in multiple national championship games that they have lost. Seems like a great coach, right? Well, what has he done the last few seasons? Since 2021, he has not gone back to the college football playoff. He's only gone to one New Year's Six Bowl. He is likely to miss it again this year. Oh, well, that's just a few years off. Give him credit. But here's the problem. The college coaching landscape, or really the whole college football landscape, it's different now than it used to be. You have to run things differently. And Dabo Swinney only wants to run things the old way. He will not go after transfers, which is crucial. He's not coaching the same sport, and there's no that Dabo Swinney, coaching how he coaches, can get a team back to where he used to get teams, and that is why Clemson should fire him at the end of this year. Thoughts, Charlie?
I'm going to disagree. I think he's done enough to keep his job. I think with the whole national championship thing and not seeing necessarily the playoff success that they would have hoped for is a situation relatively similar to, I would say, Pete Carroll in about 2019, 2020. The team is still good. They're just not at the level that they need to be to win a national championship. They need to recruit a little bit better, and I think they will. And I think it will be unfair to fire him in this scenario, but I can understand the reasons why one may want to do that. But I'm going to have to disagree with you on that one.
Yeah, so I will say, He was not originally on my list as of 24
Was he
hours
the
ago.
replacement?
Yeah, he was the replacement for Mac Brown, and I went back and forth with like guys, and he maybe wasn't the one that most merited a spot on my list, but like, let's just make this more fun and outrageous. Let's put him on the list, right?
Okay.
All right. Next up, and this is pretty simple. At number 9, Mike Gundy, Oklahoma State. So it should be noted before I go into this, I've disliked Mike Gundy for many years because of some comments that he made during COVID in 2020, but he really likes to make controversial comments, but his on-field performance isn't good enough to do, well, much of anything. He's coached there since 2005, and they've gone almost nowhere in that time. And this year, picked to finish first in the Big 12. How's that going, Mike? 0-8 so far. 0-8.
I didn't realize
That's your record.
I did not
Bye-bye.
realize it was 0-8.
Yeah, bye-bye. There's no reason for this guy to stay.
Yes,
He's going to go 0-9 when he loses to Deion Sanders.
I'm going to agree with you on this one. I did
Yeah,
not realize that they were that bad.
Yeah. Again, a lot of people picked them to win the Big 12. He's 0-9. I'm sorry.
Yikes.
There goes your job. Number 8. So another controversial one because of the coach that has been there for a very long time. Kirk Ferentz, Iowa. Why? A lot of reasons why you should fire Kirk Ferentz. The offense, for a long time, has been non-existent. You hired your son to run your offense. You couldn't realize that your offense was a complete failure and that your son was at fault, so much so that the athletic director had to step in and fire him because you wouldn't do it yourself. Oh, but you went 10-3 last year. Okay. Okay. Sorry, 10-4 last year. Great. Good for you. But when it finally came time to play ranked teams, how did you do? Not great. This is how you did in that schedule against the ranked teams. 31-0 you lost to Penn State. 26-0 you lost to Michigan. 35-0 you lost to Tennessee. That's right. 0 points versus ranked teams. Wow, you were a 10-win team mostly on the strength of your punter. Your punter was the best player on your team. The problem with Kirk Ferentz at Iowa is that he's turned his program into a joke. It's actually just become a punchline. And the definition of insanity is doing the same thing over again, and that seems to be what Iowa's doing, and they've won nothing for years. Yep. It's time for Kirk Ferentz to go.
I'm going to agree with you on that one again.
All right. Number 7, Hugh Freeze, Auburn. Look, Auburn's issues started before Hugh Freeze came in, and they're going to continue after Hugh Freeze. But let me just say, it wasn't that long ago that Auburn was one of the best programs in the country, and Hugh Freeze is not helping them get back to that place. Hugh Freeze seems a lot more concerned with beating woke than beating any of his opponents on the field, and then on the field, he loses to actual woke, as in California, the University of California. Yeah, they beat Auburn. You lost to Auburn. In your 2 seasons there, you went 6-6 the first year, and then unless you somehow win the Iron Bowl year, you're going to go 5-7 and miss a bowl game. By the way, you lost your bowl game last year, too. Nothing about Hugh Freeze's time there has made it seem like he deserves his job. You've not only lost to Cal, he lost to New Mexico State. New Mexico State. That's a team you actually lost to in your time there because you were too worried about beating woke or whatever. Go be a conservative talking head, son, and stop coaching a football team. Or, hell, join Tommy Tuberville in the Senate. Actually, don't do that. We only need one former Auburn coach in the Senate. One's actually far too many.
Yep. Again, agree with you with that one. Let's move on.
Got a cluster of SEC teams here. Next up, and this was someone I did not expect to be this year. Lane Kiffin, Ole Miss. So after this week, after Ole Miss lost to Florida, I saw a lot of questions. Where does Ole Miss go from here? And I actually think that the answer is very simple. the ReliaQuest Bowl. That's where you're headed. But after that, if you want to know where Ole Miss is headed, if they keep Lane Kiffin not great places, this was a very talented roster. Arguably one of the most talented rosters in all of college football this year. And for an SEC schedule, it was relatively easy. People at Ole Miss were talking, this is a team that could win the national championship because the combination of as easy of a schedule as you're ever going to get in the SEC and the talent on this roster. And you win the tough games. Great. But then what do? You lose the bad ones. You lose to LSU. You lose to Florida. You lose to Kentucky. With a talented roster like that, the only thing that you can really do is fire the coach, because he is making his talent severely underperform at the most random times. The games when they cannot underperform enough that they lose to those bad teams. He's had his chances. He's had them with a super talented roster. He's failed. He should be gone.
Yep. Again, gonna agree with you on that one.
All right. What are we on? Is this number 5, I think?
Yep.
Brent Venables, Oklahoma. Yeah, congrats, Brent Venables. You won your big game this week against Alabama. Okay, great, good for you. That still doesn't make up for the fact that in your tenure as the head coach of the Oklahoma Sooners, you have allowed your primary rival, Texas, who there was memes about how they were never really back. You were moving to a new conference with allowed them to not just overtake you, but become the best of the best in your new conference while you become forgettable. Brent Venables, your program is forgettable. And that's what happens when in your first season there, coming off of several postseason appearances, what do? You go 6-6 in the regular season. It hasn't gotten that much better since then. You had a chance last year. You won the Red River rivalry. Great. Good for you. You then lost a couple games you shouldn't have lost, which kept you out of the playoffs. And this year, you lost half your games. You have 2 SEC wins. You are a forgettable team, and nothing about Oklahoma football should be forgettable. No reason for you to continue coaching at Oklahoma.
Yep, and this is another one where I'm going to 100% fully agree with you on this one. They have not showed up when they needed to. They lost some crucial games last year that they really, really needed to win. It's just time to go.
Yeah. Number 4 is Brian Kelly, LSU. This is the final SEC coach that I have on my list. Look, he's only been there. This is his 3rd season. But Charlie, do you remember a few years ago when coaching at Notre Dame, he said something in the post-game interview about struggle with execution, and I think all my players should be executed. Well, yeah. I won't go as far as to say that Brian Kelly should be executed, but he should be run out of Baton Rouge immediately.
No,
what are you? What are you?
Gonna execute him.
Yeah. What are you this year? You're 7-4, I think. You lost to USC, a mid USC team, to put it mildly. Last year, you lost some crucial games. 2022, you lost some crucial games.
Colin, mid is putting it nicely.
Yeah. This is a team that 5 years ago won a national championship. This is now a team that is very far from. We thought that maybe they were good. You've lost to Florida this year. You've lost to Alabama at home. You got your ass kicked by Alabama at home. You're a bad coach.
To be fully fair, that 2019 LSU team might be the most unfair college football team of all time.
Oh, sure. It was a great team. But you've ruined LSU football since then. You suck. You're a bad team. It's not just the USC loss. There's the A&M loss, which you got crushed in. Alabama, 42-13 at home. And then in the swamp at Florida, 27-16. What are you even doing? It's pathetic.
Yep, this is another one where very clearly I'm going to agree with you on that. LSU is supposed to be a premier program, and under him, they just aren't.
Yep. Number 3, Charlie. This might be controversial that he's this high, but I think he absolutely list. James Franklin, Penn State.
Thank you.
I'm still struggling to find a single big game that you have won. Look, here's the deal at Penn State. There's an expectation of greatness, but how do you achieve that? You win just a couple of games. There's just a couple of really important games every year that you have to win, generally against Ohio State and Michigan. And James Franklin has not won those games. He has been given every opportunity in the world to show that his program is not just mid and they can beat up on the rest of the Big Ten. And he can't do that, but they can't even really beat up on the rest of the Big Ten. They can squeak by the rest of the Big Ten despite having superior talent. So you underperform in the games that you should be winning, even though you're still able to barely win them, and then you lose the games that you don't have to win all of them. You just have to occasionally win one, and you can't. There's no reason to take his program serious.
They have exactly 2 good wins this year.
Do they? Do they have 2?
They not against good teams, but 2 solid wins. That being they blew out Washington and demolished Purdue.
Yeah, exactly. And those aren't even good. Like, Washington's a fine team. Purdue is awful. And
they're beating up on the mid to lower half of the Big Ten, which is not particularly hard to do.
Yeah. Congrats. You got your participation trophy. Good job. It's not going to turn into a national championship. Nobody, I don't know a single Penn State fan that truly believes that Penn State can accomplish great things, either a Big Ten title or a national championship, with James Franklin as the coach. The number one thing that I hear from them is that we're not going anywhere as long as James Franklin is at the helm of this program. And that's accurate. All right, number 2. I went back and forth on 2 and 1 here. Charlie, you probably know the 2 coaches that are left, but number 2 is Mike Norvell at Florida State.
All right, there we go. Yep.
So look, here's the deal with Mike Norvell. You had a great run last year, a really great run, 13-0. Should have made the college football playoff, got screwed out of it. That sucks for you and your program. I get it. I was arguing very firmly that Florida State should make the playoff last year. What did you do after that? You decided, oh, well, we didn't make it. I give up. And you get blown out in your bowl game. Fine, whatever. Who really cares?
No one played.
Then this year, what do you do this year? Just become arguably the worst team in college football, or at least in the Power 4. I'd argue Mississippi State and Purdue are the only 2 that are worse. It is a disgrace as to what's happening to that once premier program. And it is, I mean, I can't think of anyone better to put the blame on than Mike Norvell.
All right, and number 1.
You know who number 1 is.
Go ahead and say it.
It's Lincoln Riley at USC.
There we go.
It's the only correct option. Look, here's the thing. Here's the thing with Lincoln Riley. Lincoln Riley is very good at getting once-in-a-generation quarterbacks and then doing absolutely nothing with them. Mostly because of his defense. Let's remember 2022. He had a great shot. Go to the college football playoff. All you have to do is beat a fine Utah team in the Pac-12 championship. And you lost, and you're out of the playoff. And then last year, you start 6-0, I believe, and you end up going 1-5 the rest of the way.
Including a game against Washington that they really, really should have won.
Yeah, this is part of the problem. There's so many games that they should have won. And this year, well, it's looking good. Maybe you figured out your defense in that win over LSU. Well, the good news is that the defense hasn't been horrid for them this year, but neither is his offense, which is the only reason that Lincoln Riley is worth having in the first place, is his offense. I mean, this to me feels like the most obvious should be fired of all time. Why have we even given him 3 years at this program? He should have been fired after last year. I look forward to next year on this same podcast saying that Lincoln Riley is the number 1 coach that should be fired, because guess what? USC's not doing anything with him. he's done enough. He's gotten them to their bowl game. Wow, whoop-de-doo! You get to go to like the Las Vegas Bowl or whatever. Congrats, dude. That's the biggest honor you're ever gonna get it at another once premier program.
Yep. Are we all done?
That is my list. Any major disagreements or points you want to make on it?
I understand that we're not allowed to put first year head coaches.
Oh yeah, I should have explained that better. No, I was not including any first year head coaches on.
But shout out to Jed Fish, and also, can you leave?
And Kalen DeBoer? Question mark.
It's what happens when you go try to play in the SEC.
Yep. All right. Thanks for joining us. Make sure to subscribe. Episode weekly wherever you listen to podcasts. Website cctalks.com is everything you need to know about the show. Call us with questions, 360-389-2630. Again, that's 360-389-2630. Follow us on Twitter, CC Talks Podcast. Follow Charlie at CC Talks Charlie. Join our Discord, cctalks.com/Discord. All this information and more in the description below. But for now, for our producer Morris, production designer Zack, I'm Colin.
I'm Charlie, and we'll see you next week.